Everyone,
Good morning, everybody.
we're learning Mishnah is Chagiga. It's Parak Beis, Chapter 2, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah 5. All right, so we need some background here. And that is that this Mishnah is going to be is going to start a long discussion about the laws of Tumah and Tahara, the laws of purity and impurity. And for our Mishnah, we need to know that there are five levels of things. They're primarily, most of them are foods, but there are five levels there are five categories of levels of sanctity, and we need to know those five levels because it's going to make a difference regarding the discussion of the Mishnah. The discussion of the Mishnah is what we call the impurity of hands. That means that there is a principle, a rabbinic principle, stam yadayim, which means hands that haven't been washed. Hands haven't been washed, and they've just been kind of doing the things that they typically do. The Chachamim said, we consider those hands impure. They're automatically considered impure. And there's a reason why they made that decree, but that's a decree. Your stam yadayim, unwashed hands, unsupervised hands. I mean, when you wash your hands, you've washed your hands, right? If somehow or another you were watching your hands the whole time, which typically doesn't happen, maybe that wouldn't be a problem. But stam yadayim, regular unwashed hands, according to rabbinic law, is considered impure. Therefore, if they're impure, then before you go touching certain things that have a certain level of sanctity to them, you're going to have to wash your hands, because otherwise, if your hands are impure, what you're going to touch is become impure. So depending on what level the food is at or the thing is at, that's going to make a difference as to what you need to do to purify your hands. Now, and some of them are really going to be a decree in the sense of that. So for instance, the first level is called chulin. Chulin is described as ordinary food. Ordinary food is not sanctified, not consecrated, just regular good old food. Okay? That good old food, okay? When we know that we wash our hands before eating food, right? Depending on what kind of food it is, if it's bread, right, and it's chulin, it's ordinary food, the halacha is we wash our hands. Why do we wash our hands for chulin? Chulin isn't consecrated. But the answer is that the Chaim basically wanted to make sure that there's an across the board washing hands for unwashed hands. We want a kind of an across the board practice that's going to make sure that what we're trying to really accomplish is going to get done. And therefore, they said that even chulin food, under certain circumstances, is going to need washing one's hands. So the first level is chulin, ordinary food. The second level is maser sheni. Maser sheni we discussed before. Maser sheni is that a person has produce, and there's a maser sheni, a second tithing that a person does. That second tithing is consecrated, right? You can't eat it you can only eat in Yerushalayim, or you got to redeem it onto money and take the money to Yerushalayim. So maser sheni has a higher level of sanctity. Then you have truma. Truma is what we separate from our new produce for the Kohen. That's a higher level of sanctity. Then you have kodesh. Kodesh means holy foods. Holy foods means sacrificial meat from a sacrifice, right? There's sacrifices that we eat their meat, whether it be a shlamim, if it's a chatas, the kohanim eat the meat. So carbon meat is called kodesh. That's a higher level. And then the highest level is called mei chatas, the para aduma water. The para aduma is the red calf that its ashes are burnt, mixed with spring water and other things. And if a person wants to become purified from the impurity that comes from contact with a dead body, you have to have that sprinkle on you. That is the highest level of sanctity of the five categories that we've mentioned. So now the Mishnah reads, Noitlin la yodayim. We wash our hands, lachulin, when it comes to ordinary food, ulamaiser, and for maiser sheni, v'letruma, and for truma. Now, washing our hands means like we wash our hands, right? You have a cup. The cup has to hold a revius. That's a quarter of a lug. That's a liquid measure from the Torah. and you have to pour it over your hands. That's very simplified Netilas Yadayim. That you have to do when you are eating ordinary food. What ordinary food needs Netilas Yadayim? Bread. The only ordinary food that the sages said you have to wash for is for bread. Now we also say here you have to wash your hands for Meiser Sheni. Okay? Meiser Sheni is a higher level of consecration than Chulin. And in that case, you have to wash your hands whether you're eating bread or produce. But again, it's for eating. If it's Meiser Sheni, and it's bread made of Meiser Sheni, it's produce made of from Meiser Sheni, you got to wash your hands for it. Truma, which is a higher level, you got to wash your hands if you want to touch it. If you're going to handle it, even if you're not going to eat Truma. If you're going to touch Truma, if you're going to handle Truma, you got to wash your hands. So when the Mishnah says we wash our hands for Chulin, Meiser, and Truma, right? Yeah, the act is Netilas Yadayim. The act is having a vessel and washing your hands from the vessel. But actually, for each one, it's going to be a little bit different. For Chulin, it's only for eating bread. For Meiser Sheni, it's for eating bread or produce, but only for eating. And for Truma, it's even for handling. That Netilas Yadayim is going to be necessary. Okay, so that is this law. All right, now next, Ulekodesh. If it comes to meat from a sacrifice, and you have stam yadayim, your hands are unwashed, matbilin, you got to put your hands in a mikveh. Matbilin means you immerse. So you don't have to immerse your whole body, but you have to immerse your hands. Okay, and otherwise, and if that's and again, if you're going to, just want to see something here. All right, it says here that for eating the carbon meat, you got to tovel your hands. If you're going to touch it, then it's like truma. You got to wash your hands. But if you're eating it, then you already have to put them in. You have to immerse them in a mikveh. Okay, that and now again, what's unique here is that this impurity of your hands is only an impurity of your hands. Typically, if a person comes into contact with a dead body, top to bottom, you're impure. It's not enough. It's not just your hands. At the same time, there's also a halacha that let's say food that becomes tamei. Food that becomes tamei, according to Torah law, cannot make a person impure, but it can make your hands impure. That's another example and that's a rabbinic impurity, where only your hands will be impure. But again, here right now we're saying, even if it's stam yadayim, and you're going to eat the sacrifice, you're going to eat the meat of a sacrifice, matbilin, you got to put your hands in a mikveh. Ulachatas, and chatas here doesn't mean a sin offering. Here chatas means the mei chatas, the paraduma water is called mei chatas. The Torah refers to the para aduma as a chatas, so we call it mei chatas, the water of the chatas, but here it means the water of that has the ashes of the paradum mixed into it. Im nitmeu yadav, if one's hands become tamei, for example, I just mentioned before, if let's say his hands touched tamei food, which only makes his hands impure, and again, that's only midrabanan, it makes his hands impure. So essentially, only your hands are impure. Nitma gufay. We consider your whole body tamei, and you have to completely immerse in a mikveh if you're going to go ahead and you're going to handle the chatas water. You're going to handle the chatas water, even if your impurity was only a hand impurity, which is the rabbinic impurity. If you're going to handle the chatas, the paraduma water, you got to put yourself in the whole mikveh. We consider like your entire body is tamei. Okay, now, but the Mishna is saying this is imnit me'uyadav. Mishna says if your hands became impure, that means they became impure. If you know they became impure, now again, they're only impurity of hands, essentially, but nonetheless, if we're talking about handling the paraduma water, then we consider like your whole body is impure. You have to immerse yourself entirely in the mikveh. But let's say it's just stam yadayim. Let's say it's just your hands that are unwashed. You don't know they became tummy, but they're unwashed hands. Then you don't have to go ahead and put yourself in the whole mikveh to handle the paraduma water. Then it would be enough to put your hands in the mikveh. put your hands in the mikveh, and it's just stam yadayim, again, ordinary hands that aren't washed, it's enough to put into the mikveh. And the Mishnah was talking about explicitly, if your hands become impure, they actually became impure, then we consider like your entire body came impure for handling the paraduma water, and you got to go to the mikveh completely.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We're not done.
Too early.
Okay. Now, Chofetz Chaim continues. He just said before that being ready or actually speaking Lashon Hara in front of someone, to someone's face, or being ready to say the Lashon Hara to someone's face, doesn't make it any less of a prohibition. Now, now, we do find in the writings of our sages that there is such a concept that if you would say this in front of the person's face, you could say it. What is that referring to? And that he says, "Hanudavcha ba'avak lashon hara, v'diber alav lishna the mishtama l'trei ape." That's talking about a situation where you're speaking what you're saying, what's called avak lashon hara, a dusting of lashon hara. That means it's not explicit, outright lashon hara, but it's rather a comment. That the comment itself is kind of ambiguous. It could be interpreted positively or negatively, and a lot of it have to do with how do you say it. Depending on your body language and the tone of your voice and your gestures and how you say it, that can make a big difference as to, okay, is this negative or is this positive? And that, says the Chofetz Chaim, that is where Chazal say, look, if you know that what you're about to say, you would say it to him in front of his face, then that's your measuring stick to know that you're not saying it in a derogatory manner. Okay? At the same time, if you know it's derogatory and you'd still say it in front of his face, that's not going to help you. That's lashon hara. But a situation where we're talking about saying something that can be interpreted in two ways. It can be interpreted positive, it can be interpreted negative. And that's going to depend on how you say it. That's where the sages said, if you would say it in the manner that you're planning on saying it, if you say it in front of the person, clearly you wouldn't do it. If you wouldn't do it if you wouldn't do it and you're not planning on doing it in front of it, saying something negative, but you want to know if what I'm going to say is going to be comprehended as negative, then the sages said what you should do is, with the manner you're about to say it, would you say it to the person in front of his face? If you know that you would, that would be an indicator that the implication of what you're saying is not negative. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.